Awakening to the relentless heat of a sun I didn't recognize, I found myself lying on the parched earth, my body etched with the memory of stone and sacrifice. The night before was a blurred procession of haunting dreams, where blood flowed like rivers under a moonlit sky, and shadowy figures danced to the primal beats of an ancient drum. I tried to rise, but the ground seemed to cling to me, as if the very soil was reluctant to release a witness to its centuries-old secrets. A figure emerged from the tree line, his silhouette barely distinguishable against the lush canopy. He introduced himself with a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of time, claiming descent from the Maya, guardians of rituals so old that they were etched in the stars themselves. His eyes, dark and fathomless, held stories of a time when gods walked among men and demanded tributes that were paid in the currency of souls. As we talked, the air around us thickened with the whispers of the past, and I was drawn into the heart of an eternal mystery. Could the ancient rites of blood and shadow still hold sway in the world of the living? Could the heartbeat of a civilization long turned to dust still resonate through the ages? With each word the descendant spoke, the veil between epochs thinned, and I sensed the awakening of something that should have remained lost to history. The story I am about to tell is one of darkness and light, of ancient gods and the echoes of their power that refuse to be silenced. It is a tale woven from the threads of nightmares, and it begins here, in the embrace of an enigma that the modern world had all but forgotten. The ruins loomed before me, their crumbling walls overrun with the relentless grip of vines and roots, as if nature itself sought to reclaim the secrets that were once whispered within. The descendant led me through a narrow passageway, the stones underfoot worn smooth by the passage of 1,000 feet. Here, within the husk of a temple that had once throbbed with life, the air was heavy with the scent of moss and decay. As we delved deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the temple, the sound of a distant chant began to rise, a rhythmic incantation that seemed to seep through the very walls. We emerged into an open chamber, where torchlight danced upon the intricacies of ancient frescoes, their colors vibrant against the test of time, depicting deities both fierce and exalted. At the chamber's center, a group of robed figures surrounded an altar, their faces hidden, their hands raised in fervent worship. The ritual had begun. The descendant whispered that what I was witnessing was the rite of resurrection, a sacred ceremony believed to bridge the worlds of the living and the dead. My heart raced as I watched, unable to tear my eyes from the unfolding spectacle. A lone figure, adorned with the plumage of exotic birds and the bones of the ancestors, stepped forward. In his hands, he cradled a ceremonial blade, its obsidian edge catching the flickering torchlight. With a voice that rose above the chant, he called upon the gods of his forebears, invoking their names with a reverence that seemed to make the very air tremble. The blade descended in a swift arc, and as it did, the chamber filled with a sound that was not of this earth. A collective gasp from the shadows that lurked just beyond the reach of the light, eager for the gift of life's essence. I felt a primal fear claw its way into my chest, a terror that was as ancient as the rites themselves. The blood, dark and glistening, spilled upon the altar, seeping into the grooves and channels that had been carved for this very purpose. It was then that the ground beneath us began to shudder, a subtle vibration at first, growing stronger, as if the heartbeat of the temple had joined our own. The figures around the altar began to sway, their voices lifting in a crescendo of fervor and fear as the boundary between the seen and the unseen grew thin. The air grew thick with power, a tangible force that wrapped around me, through me, as if searching for something within that it recognized, something it could claim. And in that moment, I understood the terrible truth of the rite. This was no mere ceremony. This was an awakening, a calling back of souls that hungered for the warmth of flesh, for the beat of a human heart. The descendants' eyes met mine, and within their depths I saw the reflection of the altar, the robed figures, and something else, something that had not drawn breath for millennia. The first resurrection was not of a body, but of an ancient force, and I was an unwitting witness to its rebirth. pulse of the ancient rite followed me as I fled the temple's suffocating embrace, the night air hitting my lungs with a shock. The forest around me was alive with sounds alien and familiar, each snap of a twig underfoot echoing like a drumbeat from the dark heart of the jungle. I was no longer an observer. I was prey, hunted by shadows that whispered with the voices of the ancients. My guide had vanished, swallowed by the dense foliage, leaving only the moon to light my path. It was no longer just a celestial body in the sky, but a watchful eye, its luminescence casting long, twisted shadows that reached for me with spectral fingers. I stumbled through the underbrush, my mind reeling from the horrors I had seen, the resurrection that had felt like a desecration of the natural order. I could feel it then, the thinning of the veil between what was and what should never be. The shadows moved with intent, coiling around trees, slithering across the forest floor, an army of darkness unleashed by the spilling of sacred blood. The deeper I ran, the more the forest seemed to shift, ancient trees groaning and bending as if trying to communicate a warning. Too old for human understanding. In the heart of the jungle, I came upon a clearing, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moon. Here, the shadows danced with a life of their own, untethered from any source. They pulsed with a rhythm that matched the chant still echoing in my skull, a beat that seemed to synchronize with my own racing heart. It was a chase that transcended flesh. It was a pursuit for my very soul. The realization hit me with the force of a revelation. The chase would never end. The shadows were not just remnants of a bygone era. They were envoys of the past, seeking to infiltrate the present, to weave their dark threads through the fabric of modernity. My escape was not just physical. It was a struggle to keep my reality untainted by the creeping dread of a forgotten time. With each step, the boundary wavered, the forest around me flickering between the now and the never. The whispers grew louder, an incessant murmur that promised truths too terrible to bear. In my desperation, I understood that the shadows sought not to harm, but to possess, to anchor themselves to the world of the living through one who had witnessed their sacred and profane resurgence. I had become the vessel for their ancient yearning, a conduit through which they could experience the realm they had once ruled. The shadows closed in, a shroud of darkness that threatened to extinguish the light of my consciousness, to reduce my existence to a footnote in the chronicle of their eternal vigil. But I would not yield to the embrace of the abyss. With each breath, I rejected their silent calls, their promises of power and knowledge. I ran, not just to escape their grasp, but to affirm my place in a world that was mine by birthright, a world of light and life, where the dead did not dictate the fate of the living. And so, the chase went on, a flight that spanned the breadth of time, where every shadow held the potential for oblivion, and every glimmer of light was a sanctuary that I, a lone sojourner, sought in the endless night. The dawn greeted me not with warmth, but with the cold realization that the curse had woven itself into the very fibers of my being. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the canopy, the shadows retreated with a silent hiss of defiance, slinking back into the spaces between worlds. I was left alone, panting, my body a map of scratches and my soul a tapestry of turmoil. The Curse was a whispering shroud upon my shoulders, a weight that sought to drag me back to the depths of a time best left forgotten. In the quiet aftermath, I understood the immensity of my plight. The horrors of the past had not faded into obscurity. They had merely slumbered, biding their time within the womb of shadows, waiting for a chance to be reborn. The ritual I had witnessed was not a mere performance, but an invocation, a beckoning of ancient deities that hungered for entry into our world. As the jungle awoke around me, teeming with the calls of the living, I pondered the enigma of my fate. To rid myself of the curse, I would need to sever the ties that bound me to the ritual, to silence the call that thrummed in my blood. It was a task that seemed as insurmountable as the ruins that housed the dark ceremony, yet it was a task I could not forsake. The alternative was to become a vessel for the gods of old, a pawn in a game that played with the currency of souls. I left the jungle with more than memories. I carried with me an eternal question, a riddle that would consume my thoughts and haunt my dreams. If the gods of the Maya still lingered, hidden among us, what offerings would they demand in this new age? Would we even recognize their altars, built not of stone and mortar, but of steel and glass? My tale is one of warning and of wonder, a narrative that spans the chasm between disbelief and dread. To those who hear my story, I leave this caution. The past may seem distant, but its echoes can still be felt, and its shadows can still be seen, out of the corner of our eyes, in the dim places of the world. For now, I walk the fine line between light and darkness, vigilant and ever aware that the next shadow I see may not be cast by the form of something living. And as I share this account, I urge you to consider the possibility that we are never truly alone, that the ancient gods may yet walk among us, their whispers carried on the wind, their gazes hidden in the flicker of a flame.